Phenomenology and Social Research online course is organized by the Consciousness Studies program. It is designed by Dr. Saurabh Tudaria, who is a researcher at NIAS. It is also conceptualized under the guidance of Dr. Sankita Menon, who is the head of the Department of Consciousness Studies and the Dean of Humanities at NIAS. So on behalf of Team Consciousness Studies program, I welcome all of you to this program. I'm sure you would all enjoy this course throughout. So a little about this course. What brings the social in the sciences? What encapsulates and encompasses the individual and the subjective? What are the problems and possibilities in qualitative research, and how do we understand the phenomenological method in relationship to all? So Dr. Saurabh Tadaria's classes have always been something that I have looked forward to at NIAS. He's a very bright scholar and researcher. And to introduce Dr. Saurabh Tadaria very briefly, he has an MPhil and a PhD from Philosophy, JNU, in Phenomenology. He worked with Azim Premji Foundation, Delhi University, ICPR as a postdoc fellow. And he's currently exploring the intersections between phenomenology and Kashmiri Shaivism in NIAS. And his recent publication is Synthesis and Transcendental Ego, Kant and Husserl, and it is published by Springer. So that is about Saurabh sir. So before I invite him for the lecture, let me just tell you that we will have the lecture going on up to around 4:50 or 5 o'clock. And post that, we will be taking all your questions. You can put all your questions in the chat box and then we'll be taking them one by one. So yeah, without further ado, I would welcome all of you on behalf of Team CSP and Dr. Sankita Menon, who is the head of Humanities Department. So thank you everyone, and we will begin now. Saurabh sir, if you could please take over.
Am I audible?
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks, thanks, Meera, for the generous introduction. And so I welcome you all for the today's course. This is like the first time I'm speaking to such a large audience online. And some of the friends I could see and some of the people whom I'm meeting first, interacting first time. So this is like a very, this is a pleasant feeling. So first of all, I would like to thank Professor Sankita Menon, who is chairperson and Dean of the Humanities in NIAS. She has actually motivated me to design this course and to give the course to the people, not only in the NIAS, but to the people from people who are outside the NIAS also. And then I must thank our course coordinator, Meera Menon, who assiduously formalized this course, because I had only the kind of the rough thoughts, and but she has streamlined and like formalized the course proper. And I would also like to thank Niharika Sharma, who is also doctoral scholar here. Despite of her busy schedule, she manages all the online activities and everything. And of course, you must be in touch with Ashwini. She is looking after all the kind of all the communication to the participants. So before, because this is like the course, and we would be like interacting with each other at least for the 5 weeks, we will be interacting with each other, and then it would be followed by a panel discussion, as all you people are aware. And I was reading the SOPs, so almost all the people have the genuine interest in the phenomenology and in the qualitative research method. And in fact, I have learned a lot by the kind of the focus they have on the qualitative method and kind of the problems they are facing with respect to their research work. So just let me give up before starting the talk. Let me give a brief introduction of what is the background of the course and what we should expect from this course. So when I have designed this course, basically I had to kind of, that is based on my PhD experience and the kind of the experience I had with, I still have with lot of PhD scholar, because all of us like kind of struggle with the research method, that what is the research method per se, which is the fulcrum of the any research work. And thereafter, after my PhD, I have done some field work and interacted with the in the palliative care and with the education, and then I have seen that how less the qualitative method has been applied in many of the field works. But even if the people who are applying the qualitative method, so they always struggle with the problem of the objectivity and the validity. So these are the some questions which actually push me to think of the phenomenology from the qualitative method perspective. So this is also a new kind of area for me. Second, the problem while designing this course I face is that because of the nature of phenomenology, as all of you know, that the phenomenology is a very kind of a very difficult text it has, and the concepts are very intricate, especially in the works of the Husserl, Martin Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, and others, Sartre, Gadamer. Especially Martin Heidegger is kind of notorious for his for the difficult writings. And second thing is the volume of the work they have produced. Like there's a huge volume of the phenomenological work, and and I'm not speaking about the secondary right authors who are if they are also like kind of equally famous. So the thing is that how to go about this in this course actually, because it will be impossible to like discuss these philosophers and to discuss all of their concepts in just the span of the 5 lectures. It will be not only difficult, it is almost impossible, and also be kind of the injustice to them, because that is a very this is a kind of a difficult kind of the area, and we cannot do justice only in the 5 class. Then what we shall be doing? So basically, when I have designed this course, so my aim is just to, because a lot of the people even in this course are not all are from the philosophy background. Some are from the social sciences, some are not even from the science background. So the problem was just to how to think of the social science, think of the phenomenology from the social science perspective. That in this course, we have to look at the, explore the basic problems of the phenomenology. That what are the basic problems of the phenomenology, what are the issues with which they deal with. And once we kind of once we have the grip over the issues with which they are dealing, then we can actually analyze whether they are relevant to our qualitative research or not. So hence uh, it is basically what we are doing is like we are basically expecting that I will develop give the context, what are the contexts in which the phenomenological concepts have been developed, and how it can be like um, uh, can be applied to the social sciences problem. So this is what I hope to do in this course of the 5 lectures, 4 or 5 lectures. And so this is not basically the lectures only. This is basically um, this is not only the lectures, but also kind of an interaction, because a lot of the things through the interaction we would try to learn from each other. So with this word, this is like the broad overview of the course. And as you know, the first is lecture today is the situating the social sciences, the myth of the given. So we'll be discussing in the today's lecture the general framework of the qualitative method, and second of the phenomenological method per se. So with this, I request Niharika Sharma to share the PPTs with you. May I request you, Niharika? So this is the first, that what is the social research? So as we all know that this social science or the social research is not something which is like very old, like the way the philosophy, science, this is not that old discipline. Social science is a very recent discipline which arrives in the 19th century, and of course with the positivism. So what is the social research? So is it the exploration of the social laws? So this kind of the thinking has arisen in the positivism, which started with Auguste Comte, but continued with the John Stuart Mill, Emile Durkheim, and they argue that the social world also follows the general laws like the physical law world. Hence, we need the proper method to discover these laws. So the point is that the positivism argue that they model the social sciences on the basis of the natural sciences. So in the science, there is a kind of a there are the physical laws like the law of gravity, photoelectric effect, and other kinds of the laws. So if you have a proper method, like a scientific method, you can uncover the laws beneath this divergent phenomena. So similarly, they have taken this model in the social sciences that we can also similarly similarly explore the laws in the social world. What happened in the social world? The overwhelming data and the divergent practices can be accounted through discovering the underlying pattern, because there is the overwhelming data and there are the divergent practices, and this gives the numerous kinds of the interpretation, and then of course this leads to a confusion or kind of a contradictory statement. So how it can be overcome? This can only be the overcome when we understood, when we believe that there is an underlying pattern beneath that. So this is kind of the philosophical model actually which positivism follow, and they extended this model to social sciences also. That hence they call the social as the social sciences. While in the some places it is called as the social studies, but the people who adhere to the social positivism, they call social also as a science. That this is also science like the natural sciences. So quantitative method is based on the law of causality, empiricism, and explanation. So once we accept that the social world is also behave like the natural world, and it also follows the laws like the physical laws. So basically the natural world bases itself on the law of causality, that there is every effect must have some cause. So you need to understand that cause if you want to explain the phenomena. So in the social science also, the same thing has been followed, that whatever there must be the effect of the some cause, and this cause must be located in some principles, some social laws, so which we need to discover actually. So they also adhere to the law of causality. For example, Durkheim talks about the social facts. So when he talks about the social facts, he says that we have to also think the social in terms of the facts. The way the facts are independent of our belief system. Similarly, the social facts are also the independent of our belief system, our cultural locations, and hence it should be explained. So there is a kind of the realist commitment to the world which grant epistemic validity to the result. Because any kind of the research, when we talk about the scientific research or the social science research, it aims at the truth, that there should be some truth it should grant. So for the positivists, think that truth is actually is this truth can only be accessed when there is a kind of the ontological commitment to the word. What do I mean by the ontological commitment to the word? That whatever we are explaining, it must refer to something which is out there, which is not depend on our interpretation, our subjective thought, but it must be out there. So positivism follow this model. Again, if we look the fifth point, that it follows the positivism or the quantitative method follows the realism kind of the philosophy, that there are the things out there. Through a proper method we uncovered that laws, and we come to the conclusion, and these conclusion, because they don't depend upon any kind of the subjective interpretation, and rather they correspond to the truth which is independent of us, hence they can be the universal in their application, they can be generalized. So yeah, so this is the overall picture, the background of the quantitative method. Next slide. Excellent. Yeah. Can you the one no before it, second, yeah, okay, this is third one, huh? This is first, my first game, yeah, second. So in this background, why do we require the qualitative method? The question is that because the quantitative method has a very special appeal to the truth, because it is something, because any kind of the social research must address the question of the truth. It must be valid. So quantitative method has a very strong appeal of the empiricism, that of the realism, that it is corresponding to the reality which is outside us. Hence, it kind of obviates the problems of the subjective interpretation of the individualism, and it claims to give a model of the theory which can be applied everywhere. So in this context, why do we need the qualitative methods? So what is the limitation of the quantitative method? Is that it cannot answer the question of why and how, which requires interpretation. That quantitative method is basically, it can of course answer the question which refers to the quantity, which refers to questions like how, like what, and like these questions, but it cannot answer the question of why and how much, which requires interpretation. We will explain this point in more detail in the next slide. This is just for a reference. Now, but suffices to understand at this point that the qualitative method is basically based on the interpretation, because there are, in the social world, there are a conflicting statement which requires the multiple interpretations. Hence, the quantitative method cannot always address to all these kind of the questions. So what are the qualitative methods? Some of the qualitative methods like ethnography, feminist method, phenomenological method, hermeneutic method, Foucauldian deconstructive method, which are quote unquote postmodern method. So in, for example, very briefly, in the ethnography, what happens, then people go to the field, they take the interviews of the people, write their narrative, see how they make sense of the various events. So by which they record the interviews and then they interpret. So this is like broadly called as the ethnographic method. In feminist method, feminist philosophers, they believe that every event also has a gender role. The way the woman will respond to a event would be different from the way a male would respond. So our social research must be inclusive of all these these variations. So feminist method address this need. Phenomenological method, which is like broadly understood as the study of the lived experience and how do we feel something. Hermeneutical method, which we'll be discussing in the last class, it's basically about the interpretation that in order to understand somebody's, you need to actually understand, empathize with the people. And then there is the Foucauldian deconstructive method. So all these things are there. So these are not the exhaustive, we should be understanding. These are the broadly method. Even within the feminism, there are many feminism. Your thing is also there. Then there is also like Simone de Beauvoir is a kind of feminism. Then there is a many kind of there is a strategic essentialism of Gayatri Spivak. Then there is also Louis Gray's feminism in the different kind of that. So there are many kind of the feminism which we of course take up in the discussion section during the interactive section. Now coming back to this Foucauldian method, which basically assumes that there is a kind of power knowledge nexus. There is the episteme, and whenever there is there is kind of the knowledge, we have to see what are the discourses, what are the other situations which lead to that particular kind of the knowledge formation. And then there is a deconstructive method, which is actually which is not about the which is mostly about how do you understand the otherness of the other, how the other is understood. So understanding other is not something, because understanding other cannot be like the way our categories operate. This is the domestication of the other, how you let the other be. So this is also very complicated methodology it has, and which is of course in the work of the Derrida. So they are quote unquote called as the postmodern method, while Foucault, Derrida and other postmoderns, they never call themselves as the postmodern, but in general people put them under the rubric of the postmodern. So the use of the qualitative method depends on the nature of the research questions. So the thing is that the nature of the research question will decide what kind of the methods we are using. The questions which are like more kind of content which require the question of what, and kind of these kind of the question which more at the objectivity. So these, suppose if there is some kind of the study that if we introduce like after COVID-19, how many people has been lost the job. So this is kind of the method. So for this we need a quantitative method. Suppose if we are analyzing that how many people in the particular age group has lost the job. But suppose if we are interpreting that, suppose after COVID-19, the people who are working from the home, what kind of the experience of the space they have, what kind of their intersubjective relationship with their family members now they have. So this requires the qualitative method. It will require the other kind of the approach altogether than the quantitative method. So that depends on the application of the method, depends on the nature of the research question, that what kind of the research questions we are applying. The scope, objective, and the problem decide the methodological approach with reference to the research. So this is all of us who are doing, who have done the PhD or doing the PhD, they know that what are the scope, objective, and the problem that actually determines or decide the methodological approach with reference to the research. Next slide. What kind of the research problems require phenomenological approach? Now the question arises. So is there the phenomenological method or a particular phenomenological method which could be like applied anywhere? Or what are the issues with the phenomenology is? What is its subject matter? So the question is that now when we have discussed the method is different from the quantitative method, because the approach toward the problems would be different in the qualitative method than the quantitative method, which will be more subject oriented, require the interpretation, divergent viewpoints. Now in this larger framework of the qualitative method, which has a numerous kind of the method, in what kind of the problems do we require the phenomenological approach? So is there like a phenomenological method which can be applied anywhere? No. So first of all, we have to understand that what are the issues with the phenomenology deals. What is the subject matter? So unless we understand what are the problems of the phenomenology, what are the issues of it, so that is very difficult to, then we can't know that where should we applying it. What is like the limitation or the implication of the phenomenological method. So before that, we have to understand that what is method. what is the relationship between the method and the truth? So this question of the method and the truth has come in the Western philosophy with the Descartes. So we all know that with the Descartes, the modern philosophy has been started, which is the famous dictum of the Descartes, I think therefore I am. But why the Descartes, with the Descartes, it is called that the modern philosophy has started. What the special thing is in the Descartes, which cut the ancient philosophy or medieval philosophy from the modern philosophy. That is because the Descartes was the first philosopher who said that we should actually have a proper method before we enter into the philosophical or the metaphysical discourse. So let us decide a method first. So his method, as we all know, is of the doubt. He says, I am not believing in everything, whatever the tradition, textbooks, whatever say, I am doubting everything. So this is method of the doubt is actually established the modern philosophy. So finally, he comes with the conclusion that I can doubt anything, but I cannot doubt my doubt. So this means you cannot deny your existence. So we are not discussing the Descartes here in the full-blown manner, but the point is that what Descartes has René Descartes has established that there is a correlation between the method and the truth. Unless you have a proper method, you cannot establish the truth. So only through following a proper method we can approach the truth. So theory starts with, so any theory though starts with a particular, but it claims the universality. It is not personal or subjective account. So whenever whenever kind of the study claim for a claim for a theory, so it should have a kind of a universal or application. Universal means that it can be taken outside of its, it can be applied broadly. It is not a personal or subjective account. So then it will be like a fiction writing. So the lure of the quantitative method, we again come back to the quantitative method because of this problem of truth. Yet the lure of the quantitative method lies in its realistic commitment to the word. It has the commitment to the word. That there is the word which is outside us, which we are referring to through our theory, which enables us to claim the objectivity. But what about the objectivity in the qualitative method? Some of you have also raised that this question. That what about the objectivity in the qualitative method? Next slide. Let us pose the problem that how do the different, so let us pose a kind of a hypothetical situation that suppose how do the different people will respond to the rumors in a communally tense area. Suppose there is an area which is a communally tense because of certain situation, and there the rumors are spread there. So how do the different people will respond to these rumors? Will they respond in the same way? No. Different social position based on the class, gender, religion will play the role in registering their response. So their response, their apprehensions would be different on the basis of their social, caste, and the gender background. The way a woman will respond to the rumors will be different from the way the male will respond. So this would be, so we see that there is a large complex thing which cannot be simply analyzed. It requires a lot of like a deep analysis and the analysis of the various variables. Hence, in order to understand the statement, comments, narrative and responses of the people, we need to interpret their responses on the basis of their social context, hopes, expectation, and other thing. They cannot only be understood at the syntactic or the semantics level. So when the people are registering their responses, comments, narratives, so we cannot only at the syntactic level by their grammatical formations, we can come to what they mean by that. We also need their social context, how the people when they will giving the, because when the people actually give the responses, and that is something very central to the qualitative method, is about the problem of narrative. Because in the narratives, when the people are narrating the incidents, they are also evaluating. So when the people give the different narrations, so what Peter Finch also says in the idea of social science. So that in order to understand meaning of the statements made by the different people in a we have to understand their social context. So qualitative method is interpretative. It is not explanatory. This is actually emphasized by the people like Dilthey, Max Weber, other people. It is in German called Westation, that it is the interpretation, that it is called as the that basically qualitative method or is the interpretative nature. It is not like a descriptive, that there is the reality outside and I'm just capturing that reality and give a value neutral statements. No, it cannot happen that way. Whenever we will relate to the social world, it requires the dealing with the multiple viewpoints, and its nature is different from the nature of the natural sciences. So this is a fundamental philosophical distinction between the quantitative and the qualitative method. One adhere to the natural science method, that we can replicate the natural world, natural science in the social sciences, while the people who are in the qualitative method, they say no, the reality actually is the interpretative in nature. It can only be interpreted. It cannot be described or explained in the way the natural sciences we do about the go about in the natural sciences. So various theories, methods are the different models to interpret the reality. Example, Marxism, psychoanalysis, feminism, etc. So whenever, because whenever there are some event or there are some problem, so whenever the different theories are given, they are actually interpret the reality through their proper kind of the worldview. Like Marxism will explain the reality in a different way, like it will relate in the kind of the socio-economic relationship, and or in the terms of the labor and other things. Psychoanalysis, when it will interpret the relationship between the two people, it will interpret in its own methodology of the id, ego, super ego, reality principle and all that. Feminism will define it in a different manner. So whenever there are the theories, they give a coherent account of the reality, that this is the way that the different things can be interpreted, that whatever the anomalies or the conflicts we see, so that theory try to give a kind of the coherent view of that. So qualitative method argue that truth has to be coherent. It should explain the phenomena coherently. So that is so as some of you might be knowing that there are many theories. There are basically three theories of the truth. One is the correspondence theory of the truth, and second is the coherence, and third is the pragmatic. So quantitative method basically base itself on the correspondence theory of the truth, like the realism, that there is the truth outside and we have to like and our statement should correspond to the fact which is independent of us. But qualitative method argues that there cannot be we cannot jump out of our skin and grab the reality as such. Our access to the reality is mediated by the concepts or by the language. So we can only give the coherent account of the truth. For example, suppose if like the example we can say, if there can be, if there are the truth out, is there a raining outside? So a correspondence theory of the truth will say, we can say there is raining outside if I see that there are rain is there. But the coherent theory of the truth would say that if you go outside and you see that your clothes has been wet, you feel like the water on your face, you see the water overflowing and other phenomena which are like correspond to the rain, experience of the raining, then only you can say that there is, then only your statement will be the truth. Otherwise, if you see the rain, actually see the rain, but you don't experience the other experience, don't have the other experience which are associated with rain, then you will feel that you are hallucinating or you are in some magical world. So the truth has to be coherent. So what happens? The qualitative method does not believes that there is a does not follow the model of the correspondence theory of the truth, that the theory has to describe the truth as it is. Rather, it says that phenomena should be accounted coherently. So whenever if there is a social problem and there is a conflict pattern has been emerging, so a theory must be able to give a coherent picture of that. It should be able to take as much variable possible and able to explain the things in the systematic in the coherent manner. Suppose if the coherence is not there, then we say that this theory is not sufficient. For example, many of the problems like the people who follow the psychoanalytical method, they say many of the phenomena cannot be accounted through the Marxist analysis, like of the individual subjectivity or kind of the anxiety they are feeling. So Marxism will say that is only because you have to see the social context in terms of the relationship between the in terms of the labor and all this. While the psychoanalysis will say that we have to see it in the childhood experiences. So they try to interpret all the variables in the particular manner. So we have to see that a theory must be able to coherently explain. So what the researcher does when in the qualitative, he let the pattern emerge and accordingly applies the method. So whenever we go to the field, we let the pattern emerge. When we register the response, so many responses has come. So on the basis of the response, we actually understand what kind of the method or the new we can apply. So that is why many times it happens, people in the qualitative method don't apply one or two methods, they apply kind of the bricolage, as Lévi-Strauss would call it, is that bricolage kind of the method, that many methods together, interpreted, feminist, and hermeneutic and phenomenological method. Next. So the thing is that accordingly the method is chosen or decided. According to phenomenologies, social word is normative and constructed through the social historical categories. So when we were talking about the coherent theory of the truth, so in this coherent theory of the truth, actually what has happening, because the coherent theory, when we were talking about the correspondence theory of the truth, so this on the correspondence theory of the truth, quantitative methodology or positivism is based, because they believe that there is reality outside and the method has to capture that reality. But qualitative method says that our access to the world is not, there is nothing like the myth of the given. There is nothing like the sense data which actually we see. Rather, they say whenever we approach the world, it is always mediated through the categories, through the concept, through the language, which are historically and the socially shaped. So that is why whenever we understand whenever we explain the phenomena, so our own background, our own situation will also come into the play. So some of the people have interestingly said that in the qualitative research, there is nothing like the subject object. It is like the subject subject. Means that is to say that whenever we are analyzing the social world, so a social world is nothing like the object out there. It is basically we are also situated in the our social world, and the task of the researcher is just to analyze it, just to see what kind of the biases he has, what kind of the historical situation he or she has, and how it is like play the role in interpreting the social world. So the word is not given, but rather constructed, interpreted through the situated consciousness. Example, surprise, horror experience. That many of you people must, I think all of you must have seen the horror movies. So this, now the question is that why do we experience, how do we experience the horror? Because we can experience the horror because there is the element of the surprise. We are expecting the person would be like, just like another person, and he turns out to be some zombie or the ghost. So this surprises her. So what does it show? It shows that our consciousness is already expecting something. on the basis of the already lived experiences. It is expecting something, and when this expectation is not met, different kind of the responses comes. Like the horror is possible. The person who who is not able to get surprise, he or she is also not able to get experience the horror or any even the experience. Like for example, what is the joke? The person who knows the joke, what will come out, he will not be able to laugh at the joke only. We can only laugh at the joke because we expect something like very serious and something very trivial comes out. So it actually become the hilarious situation. So this means that consciousness, whenever it is relating with the other people, with the world, it is always interpreting, expecting on the basis of its past experiences. So there is nothing like that there is a neutral subject meeting the neutral object. So this is not possible. This is what phenomenology says, the abstraction. It is not the phenomenological experiential, because the experience says that there is always the experiential subject which has the background. It is interpreting the world. Hence, the experience of the world, events or other is not random, but always the certain structures. Phenomenological method analyzes the essential invariant structures which make the experience possible. Now, this is like the main crux of this lecture, that whenever we are experiencing the word events, so this is not like the random. There is our consciousness is obeying the certain structures. So these structures are not something which is which are like the essential, which is like the fundamental, which make the experience possible. So whenever we will study Husserl, Heidegger, Gadamer, and other phenomenologists. So we are not interested in we are not reading their history. We are not doing the history of philosophy. We are not interested why, because some people say, okay, that was a German experience, why you are French experience, why you are bringing it to the Indian experience. Nothing like that, because whenever we talk of the philosophy always talks about certain structure. That is why philosophy is different from the cultural studies, because cultural studies would locate itself in a particular culture. But whenever we are talking about the philosophy, either it is the Indian, Western philosophy, so whenever they are talking about the structures, they are actually applied anywhere. Of course, in the given some condition has to be met, which is so it is not the so phenomenology is basically what Gallagher and Jahavi says in the Phenomenological Mind. They gave a very beautiful definition of phenomenology, that it is not the subjective account of experience, but the account of subjective experience. So phenomenology is not something which is I'm thinking like I'm just recording my personal experience, which is only, for example, related with the Saurabh or with some XYZ and their personal experiences only. This is not the study of that. It is the study of the account of the subjective experience, that whenever we give the subjective, whenever we experience something subjectively, so what are the structures, necessary conditions which are required for the experience to take place. Hence, that is why phenomenology is something that's very closely related with the consciousness. So there are these are a few invariants in phenomenology. So there are some few invariants in the phenomenology. These are not exhaustive, and some of it we will discuss in the next classes, but this is just the introduction of that first person perspective. That phenomenology deals with the first person perspective. Phenomenology is not something which is like giving the third person perspective on anything. Third person perspective means that everybody can have a same kind of the perspective on the same thing. No, phenomenology is not dealing with that. It is not a scientific study of the phenomena or the data. It is the first person perspective, that how the subject feels when it actually, like for example, if there is a kind of in the COVID-19 context, how the females are experiencing the solitude, or how the males, how the children, for example, the way the children are experiencing the COVID-19 time is altogether different from the way the adult has been experienced, because they can't make sense that why these things are happening, why they cannot go and like mix with their peers, meet with them and do all these things, because play something so fundamental to their existence, while for us, like when we grow up, the work become fundamental to our existence. So phenomenology deals with this first person perspective. It is the analysis of this first person standpoint. Intentionality second. So what is intentionality? Intentionality is basically like Husserl said, that consciousness is always the consciousness of. So whenever we have to discuss the consciousness, it has the feature of aboutness. It will relate to something out there in the world or some mental experience. So we cannot talk of the consciousness which is neither relating with the outside nor with any experience. So that talk of the consciousness is not phenomenology is interested in, because it takes experience as the basis. So whenever we experience, we cannot experience the consciousness like absolute consciousness, neither relating to something out there in the world nor something which is inside. Transcendental. This is very crucial. Whenever we think of the transcendental, we think, okay, transcendental is something like which is outside, given by the God or something in the above in the heaven. Phenomenology doesn't say, and transcendentalist, of course, comes in the first of all comes in the Immanuel Kant Critique of Pure Reason, which is taken up later by Edmund Husserl in the Transcendental Phenomenology. Heidegger also kind of take it, and some of the people interpret Heidegger also as a transcendental philosopher. So we are not going into debate of that, but we are just trying to understand that what is transcendental. Transcendental simply means, I will give by example. Suppose I see, for example, there is a like if I ask you that show me a table, so people can easily point out, okay, this is the table. But if I again push and ask you whether you actually see the table, then again people will respond, yes, we will see the table, but actually we don't see the table. What we are seeing here are the colors only. So nobody can show me the table. It can only refer, whenever I say point out to the table, they can either point out to the color or the texture or to the shape and something like particular, but nothing like the table. So does that mean that we never experience the table? No. Then comes the response that, okay, table is actually the mixture of that. If all this we connect it with each other and kind of then this image is the table. So that is what the transcendental philosophy, that this combination function, this synthesizing function of all the elements together and create an image and to identify it as an object is not in the word outside. This is the this conceptual interpretative job it is what the mind does. So that is what the transcendental philosophy argues. So this is like a very vast, but this is in a very short. No inner outer dichotomy. Now, phenomenology doesn't believe that there is inside and outside. This is plain. People say this is counter common sense, counterintuitive, because we see that whenever I close my eyes, I see my mental theater, and when I see outside, I see the world out there. So how it is possible that there is no inside outside? But what phenomenology is not like declining or questioning this common sense, but they say that the word is actually something which always looks meaningful on the basis of our experience. For example, the person who is like going to catch up the flight and he or she is in the hurry. So for him, the word will look different. The traffic will look different, everything. While the person who will just come to enjoy, the word will arise a different kind of the emotion. So word is not outside, is not something which is a neutral, which is nothing like a physical object, but is something is always interpreted and in the way interpreted as on the basis of our emotions and our projects. word. So word is something like, so that has connected to this inside outside dichotomy is the notion of the word, which we'll mainly discuss in Heidegger when we'll, but word is something which is, as I said, which is always full of the possibility. The word is not something which is out there, but something which is full of possibilities. And then there is the space. What is the space? Like I remember some of the person in this group, she is researching on the how the female body respond to the religious space, like in the masjid. So space is not something which is like neutral, which is like a object to be put, like we put a like a ball in the cupboard, but the space is something which is like, which gives up the orientation. So the space in the home, space in the office, space like a regimented space, all these kind of the space plays a very profound role in defining our subjectivities, our orientation of the body. Time is very crucial in Heidegger. So time is something in phenomenology. Time is not something the connection of the now event. It is something which is also deals with our projects and everything. Then there is the body. Body, of course, we had described. The body is not something which is only like a material body. Body is something which we'll discuss detail in the Merleau-Ponty, but body is something which is only which gives us orientation in the world. And then we will discuss about then there is the intersubjectivity, narrativity, that our identity is basically the narrative, that the self is not something static, immutable, but the self is something which is always evaluating, developing, making the narrative. So narrative is not something which is essential to our being, because the narrative gives us a perspective on our existence, perspectives on our world. So finally, so these are the structures. So the study of these invariant structures gives objectivity and validity to the phenomenological method. So this objectivity is not like the objectivity of the positivism, but this gives a validity to the phenomenological method. Hence, phenomenological method anchors the qualitative research through analyzing these invariants. So these are the essential and the invariants on the basis of which the qualitative research is done. So this is with this, I would say that this is the brief introduction of the phenomenology in the last slide especially, but this was mainly done to give a broad overview of the phenomenological method and how it can be like a have significance to the qualitative method. In the next classes, especially in the Husserl, Heidegger, and Merleau-Ponty and Gadamer, we would discuss it in detail, all these things, and on the basis of the reading. Thank you for you all for your patience.
Thank you, Saurabh sir, for that excellent class. Now we will be taking questions. You can please type out your questions in the chat box, and then we will take them one by one. We will explain the reading the next class after the question answer session. So any other questions that you have, please type it down in the chat box. So there is one question from Victor Banerjee. Victor Banerjee, are you here? So the question is, with lived experience and epistemology, which differs on the basis of conscious, unconscious, and subconscious mind, and how reality is often emerging from situated knowledge, how we can say truth should be coherent? Saurabh sir?
Yeah. Because your voice was echoing, can you?
Yeah, sure.
Hear the question. Can I see?
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible, but the voice is breaking. Okay. Can you just point out where is the question actually? I can.
Yeah. Niharika, can you please point out Victor Banerjee's question?
Okay, I got it.
I'm trying to unmute him, but I think he's not allowing that thing.
Fine. Okay. Okay. So the question is that with lived experience and standpoint epistemology, which differs on the basis of the conscious, unconscious, and subconscious mind, and how reality is often emerging from situated knowledge, how can we say truth should be coherent? Okay. Like, for example, like lived experience and the standpoint epistemology, of course, relates with the phenomenology, but phenomenology doesn't subscribe to the vocabulary of the unconscious and the subconscious, right? Of course, Paul Ricoeur has calls it the hermeneutic of suspicion. So suppose if we take the standpoint of the subconscious or like the unconscious, and then we argue that how reality is often emerging from the situated knowledge and how can we say truth should be coherent. So if I understand the question is that if the reality is something which is based on the situated knowledge, then how can we talk of the truth? Because the truth by definition is something which is like applicable to all. So that is my point actually, that the truth is basically coherent in the nature. Because if the truth is something, if we have the correspondence theory of the truth is something which is outside there and every theory must like refer to it. Then of course subjective or the qualitative method cannot yield the truth. So they dissolve this problem by saying that actually the truth, we have to forego this picture of the truth, which is the based on the correspondence theory. Rather, we think that the truth is basically the coherent in the nature. And this is something very interestingly is also taken up by all the most of the philosophers of the science, Larry Putnam, Thomas Kuhn, and of course Richard Rorty also. He's not philosopher of science, but he talks of that. So there are the different models of the truth. So we have to think accordingly on the notion of the validity.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now we'll take another question. This is from Amrit Mishra. Would you ascribe the positivist approach of the West to the dualistic worldview?
Okay. Sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Where is?
It's from Amrit Mishra. Would you ascribe the positivist approach of the West to the dualistic worldview? Amrit, are you here? Would you like to elaborate on your question? Amrit Mishra?
Where is this?
Yeah, he's not here, I think.
Okay, then maybe we can move on to a different question. Ishu Saxena has a question. What is the difference between being and being with the capital B and being with the small b in Sartre? Saurup sir, you are muted.
Yeah. This question is actually not in being, and small being is not in Sartre. Actually, it is in Martin Heidegger, right? Because Martin Sartre talks about the being and nothingness. It doesn't differentiate between the big and the small b. That is more in like in Heidegger actually. And in fact, Heidegger's second translation, first translation of Being and Time by Macquarie and Davidson, it has this differentiation. And interestingly, the second translation by John Stambaugh, that doesn't make that kind of the difference.
Okay. So Suvradeep Dasgupta is asking why you have mentioned the Baconian method while talking about methods.
Okay, where it is after?
I think.
Yes, sir. If I am audible, I can just spell out my question. Hello, Saurabh sir. Am I audible?
Who will take?
Yes.
Yes, I am Suvradeep. The host asked me to unmute myself. So
Yeah. Please.
First of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation, sir. You made these difficult things so simple. My humble question was, while talking about method, why didn't we bring any mention of Francis Bacon? Because I feel even before talking about Descartes, we need to have a mention regarding Bacon, isn't it, sir? Just a question, just a query to you.
I'm not sure actually, because it must be, because if you are saying, you must have a reason to that, because I have not read that Francis Bacon that much. Of course, he talks a little bit, I know about the knowledge power, but the purpose of the aim of this lecture, when I was talking about the method, so of course in philosophy, basically it starts with Descartes. And why I emphasize on the Descartes, because of the particular methodology he approaches, like of the doubt, that unless I believe in something, I cannot believe unless I doubt everything, and I will not, and only that doubt give rise to the knowledge. So I'm not sure that Bacon has done that. If he had done that, then I would be happy to, if you can, like in the later on, if you can give me the references, I would happy to consider that.
Thank you, sir. So now Arjuna Venkatesh has a question. I think it's the difference between objectivity and subjectivity or something. If I'm a physicist, can I take an interpretivist worldview and not a positivist worldview?
Where is
Arjuna Venkatesh's question?
Yeah. If I'm a physicist, can I also take an interpretive worldview and not a positivist worldview? That depends on, again, what I have mentioned, that what kind of the method we are applying depends, because method is not something which can be like blanketly or like without any context, it can be applied anywhere. Some kind of the research problem requires the quantitative approach, some kind of the research problem requires the qualitative approach. That depends on the nature of your question. Suppose if you are interpreting, like some of the feminists have done, like how the woman experiences of the physics, it would be radically different from the male's experience of the physics. So such kind of the things will require a more qualitative and approach. While suppose if there is something, if you are doing something in the quantum particles or like the theory of relativity, then I'm sure that that requires more like a different altogether approach than the qualitative. So again, that depends on the kind of the research problem we have.
Professor, hi, this is Arjun. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Professor, but I agree that method is dependent on the research question, but then the worldview is more of a belief system than something which is derived logically. So it's essentially the ontological portion is essentially it's a belief system, and hence it doesn't depend on the research question or the context even, but it depends on how one sees the world or how one makes sense of this world. So in that case, if my belief system is more relativistic than a realist, so, and I'm a physicist, let's say I'm a physicist, so how do I proceed with my research? Like basic physics research.
Okay. So suppose if we say that there is a kind of that the physicist has the more kind of the different ontological commitment to the world than like a social scientist. Okay. So that again depends, like this is the problem, like then it will fall in the, like in the philosophy of science, that on the one hand, we can say, okay, the word which is out there, there is certain kind of the fundamental kind of the structures in the word. Okay, which there can be a mathematical language, which is like, which refers to the reality, while the natural language which a social science use, which is more interpretative in the nature. So that is the difference. But again, there are some philosophers of the science, they say actually the talk of the reality as such is because even the science, when they are talking about the reality, about the things which is outside, that depends on the language of the scientific community. There is a particular kind of the language. For example, when we talk about the causality, word doesn't talk us in the causal language. Causality is the language actually. So this is constructed by the mind, that this is the causality. So in the language of the causality, we give the realistic interpretation of the word. but word is not something which is speaking to us in the causal manner. So hence many philosophers of science say that we cannot grab that there is a kind of the link, even in the scientific domain, there is a kind of the linguistic practices which gives us the picture of the reality. That is why Thomas Kuhn comes that there is a different science actually works on the paradigms. Some paradigms are different from Newtonian paradigm, are different from the Einstein paradigm. So they problematize this view that there is a kind of the reality out there, and kind of the language has to adhere to that. That again depends on the kind of the context actually. So this is what all I have.
Okay, thank you, sir. We will take a question from Gagan Chotkar now. May I also request all of you to please switch on your videos, because this is an interactive session, so it will be great if you can switch on your videos and we can see you. So yeah, Gagan Chotkar, are you here? The question is, when we are doing a normative study, say ethics, or an evaluative study in political philosophy, how can phenomenology be used as a methodology?
Can I elaborate on this, Dr. Saurabh, just, to what I've already asked? So, when we are, because you mentioned that when we are using phenomenology also as a methodology, right? So, and also how, we are, there is interpretation involved, right? And we try to understand the social realities, say, also from the perspective of social context. So when we are doing something evaluative or normative in nature, do you think that phenomenology can serve as a suitable methodology there? Because again, the question of objectivity, and because things are of course value laden, right? So how do you see the relevance of phenomenology as a method as far as normative and evaluative inquiries are concerned? Thank you.
Thank you, Gagan. This is a very nice question. So again, you are right. So again, the question is like there is a, that there are two paradigms in the political philosophy, especially one is the major Kantian paradigm, which is based, and another is which is more, as you said, that which grants the ontological commitment to the rights, to the individual freedom, autonomy, and in fact, criticize that in this interpretation, these basic things are lost. But at the same time, there is also the Hegelian model in the political philosophy, which talks about the recognition. That it is not only about the autonomy, it is also about the recognition. Because the different people who are in the social world, especially when Hegel talks about about this idea about the I forget that German name. So when he talks about the social world, Sittlichkeit. So in this ethical world, the people have to recognize each other. So this recognition, I think that is where the phenomenology, the salience of the phenomenology comes, because it helps you to understand what kind of the different social actors and the social people have the different kind of the concern. And the phenomenology, of course, it cannot give a kind. Phenomenology is more like a descriptive and the interpretive. It cannot like suggestive, which is the job of the political science, to give the suggestion, to give a kind of the normative direction. But I think on the basis of this interpretation, we can, of course, go to the Hegelian model of recognition, which I think the Charles Taylor has done actually.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we will take a question from Dr. Ananya Barua and then go back to the other ones as well. Dr. Ananya Barua, may I invite you to please ask your question?
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Saurabh. I hope I'm audible. So great to hear from you, Saurabh. Just to back, to the JNU days. Again, you had been brilliant. Thank you. Saurabh, very quickly, I just wanted to know your take on the phenomenological model for a sportsman embodied modes of experience, especially the indigenous sports. I'm sure you must be understanding why I'm asking this, because, for this, whatever that's going on in my mind right now, right? For the course that is soon to start at Hindu College. So it's indigenous sports becoming so much in my mind. So I was wondering if you can kind of reflect or maybe throw some light on the It's just like, maybe an actor's embodiment, we do understand, but I'm more interested in understanding the sportsman's interaction, or his embodiment rather. How would you, throw light on the lived experience of a sportsman, an indigenous sportsman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is like a brilliant question in the sense, because this is like a very good application of technology, and especially in the sports actually, that how the sports and the lived experience could be interpreted. And of course, as you said, because takes me time, because I never thought in that direction, but of course, phenomenology has application in that. One the quick answer is coming to me, especially from the works of especially the Hubert Raffles, when he talks about the coping actually, that our fundamental, which he takes up from the Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger, of course, that our fundamental relation to the world is not in the terms of the perceiving the things, and about the coping. And I think because your work is also on the mental content, so you know it better, that how we cope with the world. So I think and he differentiate between this aspect of knowing that and the knowing how, which he takes from the Gilbert Ryle, that the sports basically have this, the people who are doing the sports or the mountaineering, so their skills is not something like calculative in the nature. It is just more like coping. So in that context, they come up with the new solution. So coming up with the new solution, because when the sports person develops a new moves or do something innovative, so that is not based on some kind of the calculative thinking or the analytical thinking, but more on the basis of the coping strategy, that how to cope up with that situation in the better way, and the solution, and in that solution, the whole body actually respond. So this is like a very interesting question, and I would just this is just like a very kind of a basic thing I could say on that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Now, Dilip HR has a question. Dilip, sir, are you here? The question is about what is the significance of phenomenology in writing authentic history?
Okay. So about the Heidegger has actually written, in fact, there is a whole like a section in the Being and Time on the authentic historicity. So he takes up the question of the what makes the history historical. Like history is something, what makes the human a historical being. So is it like what is the difference between the historicity, say, of a bottle and the human being? So bottle can also be the historical because it is also in the time. So how does the human is different from that? So his question is that comes because human evaluates, and human in the time actually there is the primacy of future. So fact like whether the COVID-19 or coming of say the Modi in the power is good or bad cannot be told right now. It can only be told in the light of the future event. Suppose if under the Modi direction, India shines, then we would say, okay, present government is so wonderful. And if turns otherwise, then we say, okay, no, it is a bad. Earlier government was good. So for human being, the past is not something which is close. It is always interpreted. So that is why the people, even in their individuality, keep on rediscovering their love. They say, okay, earlier it was bad, then say, okay, with the new husband, no, that person was good. So this is called, because we have the primacy of the future. So this is, we'll discuss in detail in Heidegger's lecture.
Rishali Gupta, is she here? Rishali? So the question is about mention about phenomenology method from Indian philosophical point of view.
So this is actually like there's a lot of work actually in this direction is done by J.N. Mohanty, and I think it is, especially there is a recent.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, good evening, sir. This is Vrishali Gupte, Professor Vrishali Gupte from Mumbai SIS College. Sir, I have two questions. First and foremost, sir, congratulations. On behalf of all the participants, that you have made this difficult and complicated topic so easy and lucid for us to understand. So thank you so much, sir. So my first question is, can we understand the phenomenological method from any specific Indian darshana or any Indian system I have is this phenomenological method sounds very meta-philosophical. So is that so? Is what I want to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rishli Gupte, for this question. So this is, of course, like a lot of actually studies on Indian philosophy and phenomenology has been done, especially the works from the ICPR, J.N. Mohanty. But if you ask me, so I find two, three like Advaita Vedanta, Kashmiri Shaivism. In fact, I'm working on the convergence between the Kashmiri Shaivism and phenomenology in my work in NIAS. So these things, especially in the Kashmiri Shaivism, in the tantric practices, I see the more convergence of the phenomenology with the with this Indian traditions. And second, you talked about the meta-philosophical phenomenology is meta-philosophical, if I understood you. So like philosophy, as I understand, itself is a meta-discipline. So I don't know what is actually the meta-philosophical about philosophy, because philosophy is something which, as you know, that is a meta thing. It gives a kind of the basis of everything. It gives a metaphysical view of the thing. So phenomenology, it basically we can understand is more kind of the epistemological enterprise, which is rooted in the modern philosophy, especially post-Kantian tradition, because the Kant talks about the finitude, that only in the Critique of Pure Reason, he says that only that first of all we have to criticize, set the limits of the reason, then we enter into the metaphysical inquiry. Similarly, so he comes up with the conclusion, this is our senses which produce the word in the particular way. Similarly, phenomenology also says that we have to, while talking about any kind of the metaphysical inquiry, any kind of the inquiry, we have to first of all give attention to the to this finitude, like the body, otherness, our social and cultural location. So these things doesn't become the subjective. That is what I'm at pain at defining, that these things are not subjective or individual. These are things, the very structure of our being in the world. So which we'll discuss in detail in the next lectures.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a lot of questions coming in. Please note that we will also be opening the WhatsApp group for further discussion. So all questions can be put up there as well. Sir will be answering them. We will take another 1 or 2 questions quickly, and then we will take the rest of the questions in detail in the WhatsApp group. So Ms. Kamlesh Bansal, are you here? We could take your question. Kamlesh Bansal, she here? She's doing her research on construction workers in the domain of public administration and public policy analysis. Okay, so sorry, this is question regarding readings, sir. So all the questions regarding readings, can we please have it emailed to Saurabh sir? I think it will be easier for him to respond that way. We'll take another question from...
Yeah, there is some interesting remark by Rucha Joshi that Francis Bacon came around in the 19th century, where the Descartes come up the methodology in the 15th century. So this is an important observation, which I think Victor Banerjee raised this. Somebody has raised the question regarding this. Okay, now coming to that.
And Beta, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this name right. Beta Shlo. Okay. Has a question. Very grateful for the introduction. Question is, can you please once again explain the subject-subject notion?
So this, yeah. So Beta, the thing is that this subject object and the subject notion is basically this is actually, I think, has given by the Dilthey actually, that in the social world we cannot have the dichotomy like in the natural sciences, like the subject and the object. It is basically when the people who are in the social world, they are also a subject, they are not the object. So whenever so this is like a subject approaching to the other subject. Hence it requires the altogether different method, which he called as the which requires interpretation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Shubhankar Basu has a question. How can responsive television content be validated using phenomenology?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go on.
Yeah. Can I unmute my video as well?
Sure, please do.
Hello, sir. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask you that when you're talking about phenomenology,
Your voice is coming very low. Your voice is coming very low.
Show me, sir, now. Am I audible, like loud and clear?
Yeah, little bit. Yeah. Yeah. You
Sir,
can tell. Yeah, this one.
I'm saying that under phenomenology, you mentioned various kinds of methodologies. So what I wanted to ask you is that when somebody is analyzing responses, or for that matter, response to television content in the terms of dialogue or reaction to text or violence, there is always a problem with validation because over time responses change. So is there a methodology under phenomenology which can validate validate it better, or is there some way in qualitative analysis using phenomenology where I can validate my argument in a much better manner? Because there is always a threat, and the question by quantitative researchers is posed because it's not a long-term phenomenon. So that is something which often threatens a lot of people who are doing research in behavioral, who are conducting behavioral research. That's all.
Thank you. So the thing is that when I discuss the phenomenological method and the various headings under it, they are not separate methodology. These are the kind of the various structures in phenomenology, like body, space, time, which actually when a social science approach to the social world, he or she must take into account that the person who is located in the social world, so his responses mediate through this. So their references to the space, time, and all that comes come through these categories. Now your question is that suppose if the responses keeps on changing, and this is the problem. Yeah, that is the thing, and I think I was reading somewhere that these things come actually, that when a social scientist approaches, people give the conflicting responses, and there are some responses also change. So that is why I think the importance of the narrativity is very significant actually, because in the narrative, when the people give the narrative account of the something, so they don't contradict each other. They try to make, of course, for a social scientist, it seems that they are contradicting, but actually they try to give a coherent, from their side, they try to give a coherent picture of the thing. So a social scientist, when see that why these contradictions are emerging, why these things are coming up, so it also give him access to the other kinds of the factors which affects his or her response, right? So all these things have to be taken into account, that all these variables. So this is what I would like to say.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now we'll be taking all the other questions on the WhatsApp group. We'll be opening it up, and you can put in your comments and questions there. And as far as the feedback form is concerned, we will be giving it by the end of the course. So if there is anything important that you would like to communicate, please text me, or you can always contact me through WhatsApp, and I will look into it. So now I would also like to bring into your notice that the mandatory reading for the next class is the Lebenswelt in Husserl by Dagfinn. It is in the list of reading material that we have already given you. So please do read this specific piece by Dagfinn Folesdal. And in that same file, you will also find another essay. It is called The Origin and Significance of Husserl's Notion of the Lebenswelt. It is a suggested reading, so we would actually like to go through it as well if possible for the next class. Our next class will be on 14th September. It will be an introduction to phenomenology, Husserl and the life world. So please do read it. And thank you, sir, for this very, very good lecture. Yeah, I will definitely send the reading list in the WhatsApp group as well. And okay. Yeah. So yeah, we will be sending the reading list and what you should read in the WhatsApp group. We'll write it down for you. So yeah, thanks again, sir, for the class, and I hope all of you will turn up for the next class as well. And yeah, I would like to thank Niharika for all the technical support that she has been giving, Abhishek and Ashwini for the publicity and coordination. And last but not the least, both Sankita ma'am and Saurabh sir, who relentlessly work with us and give us all these great lectures. And all of you all for asking such good questions. So we will see you again for the next class.
Meera, just a minute, can I say something?
Yeah, sure, Niharika, please go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the point that the certificates will be given if you attend minimum of 4 classes. Actually, your attendance in our team regularly checks the attendance throughout the Zoom session. And we have 3-4 methods through which we actually identify that you attended the entire session or when did you log in. So I just wanted to make this point clear. For the certificates will only be provided, there'll be only one certificate for the entire course, which will be given after the completion of the course. And also the feedback form, the link will be sent after the course, not for each class. So there'll be only one certificate and one feedback form link. Back to you, Meera.
Yeah, that's all. That will be all. So if you have any further questions, please just write back to me and we will get back to you. That will be all. Thank you, everybody.